Hey there, it is your host, Kendi, with the Kingdom Connect podcast. And today we have somebody that I enjoy talking to. I was actually on her podcast a couple of times, and so she is returning the favor. We have author Parker J. Cole on. Parker, will you introduce yourself to the people?
Hey, Kendi, I am so excited that you had me on your podcast. I am first of all, happy for you. Congratulations. I cannot wait to see how your podcast is going to grow. Very excited to have you to be a part of this. And for you, dear listener out there, I read all her books, The Knight in Shine and Battered. Is it Battered Armor or it's
Damage,
Battered Armor? Damaged Armor. See, I totally
damage,
forgot it, but I read
tattered,
them all.
damaged, dented.
Damaged, dented, battered, broken armor. So I read her entire series. It was Bahamian, and that's the first time I had a Bahamian author on my show. So I was really excited to read it. I loved it. So if you haven't read her books yet, make sure you read them. So, but I'm
Thank
supposed
you.
to talk about me. Sorry. Okay. So I am a USA Today bestselling author of historical romance. I have been a podcaster now for 10 years. I showcase Christian authors worldwide. I enjoy writing historical romance because I love to explore romance and history through that vehicle. There's lots of wonderful stories to tell through history, and I like to be the one to open up the veil and see what's behind door number 1, 2, or door number Z, whatever door number Z is. I want to see what's behind it. So that's what I do.
And I'm so glad you do what you do. I remember one year, my brother asked me what I wanted for my birthday. And of course, I like to read, but I had stopped reading books that were not Christian, but I really like historical romances. And so I told him, I was like, I want a historical Christian romance. And he's like, I searched
Good luck.
over, couldn't find nobody. I searched high and low. Um, and then I discovered you. So I am happy that you do what you do because I love romance, I love history, and I'm a Christian. So you put it all together into one for me. So did you always write historical romance?
I didn't always write historical romance. I got into it roughly around 2017, 2018. I was
What?
invited to be part of what's called a multiple author project, a MAP. And the premise was that this town, fictionally named Silver Pines in Oregon, was dominated by lumber and dominated by the mines.
Mm-hmm.
1899, I think it was. And a earthquake happened in 2 days. The first earthquake did a landslide to kill most of the men. The second earthquake did the lumber yard to kill most of the men. So the women are left without husbands, fathers, sons, brothers. And we were to rebuild this town, but the women had to get married. And so we created a mail order groom series where the women would say, wanted. My first book in that series called Wanted Man of Honor. And he was a blacksmith because when
Mm-hmm.
all the men die, who's going to take care of the metal work that needs to be completed? So
Mm-hmm.
that was my first foray into historical romance, into historical genre. And from there, I just got bit by the historical romance bug. I started to realize just as speculative as fantasy and sci-fi and steampunk and horror and all those other speculative fiction genres are, so is historical. However, you are bounded by the real world.
Right.
And I started to see a lot of freedom in those boundaries. So, for instance, I have to look up the etymology of a lot of words just to make sure that word was in usage during
Right.
the time period, because readers will call you out on it. I had one author mistakenly use pregnant in a story set in 1892, I think. And the readers were like, they did not use the word pregnant until 1960 publicly when
Oh
I
my,
Love Lucy came out. Okay. So
my goodness.
before then, you did not say you were pregnant. You were in the family way. You were being confined for a while, depending on
What?
what area
You
you
didn't
were
say you
in,
were with child?
with child, in the family way. You did not say you were pregnant. Okay. So
Wow.
Yeah. So little things like that. I'm constantly on etymology, but then I learn a lot because some of the words that I think would not be in use were, for example, I just recently learned that blockhead was in use since 1500s.
What? With
And
the
I
same
didn't know
thing.
that. With the same meaning changed around the 1600s because at
Mm.
first a blockhead was, a blockhead, like a block of wood, that. And then over time,
Literal
yeah,
blockhead. Yeah.
yeah. And then over time, it started to, be associated with people. So, like around 1600s to 1700s. So even though it gets a little tedious, I like the
I was just
tedium.
gonna ask you that. I was just gonna ask you if you find that to be challenging.
It can be because sometimes I can get bogged down by the details because I want to make sure that even though I have this creative license, I
Mm-hmm.
still want to have that reality. And it's easier if my heroine, who is in 1857, looks at the guy and says, Richard, my love, I am with child. Then, Richard, I'm pregnant. You see what I'm saying? It's a totally different feel if you say it differently, how
Mm-hmm.
they would have said it, because it was highly embarrassing for a woman who wasn't married to get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a big deal, like, oh my gosh, you're pregnant, you don't have a husband?
Mm-hmm.
My word. So you didn't want
You
that
would
type
never
of
say it.
stigma.
Yeah, you would never say it. I got it.
So
So, what is the most rewarding thing from writing?
I have to say, the most rewarding thing I've gotten from writing is to see improvement in my writing.
Wow.
Because when I first started, there were things I know now that I didn't know. And I think a lot of authors make the mistake of wanting to go back to an older book and correct it because now they've learned so much more
Mm-hmm.
since then. However, one of the greatest compliments, or rather the greatest compliments I had recently, was a reader who said, Parker, I have followed you from the beginning and your writing has improved dramatically.
Wow.
And I almost cried because I needed to hear that day. But I don't want to go back and change the more amateurish writing because
Mm-hmm.
maybe what I consider amateurish is what someone loves, but it
Mm-hmm.
also is a testament that I'm not the same writer I was 7 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago. That as I've gotten older and as I've gotten better with each book, that is shown in a visual medium. So I think that's one of the most rewarding things about writing is that I can look back and see where I was
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully see where I'm going.
So how many titles have you authored?
I want to say, and I don't quite know, I
That's
want to
nothing.
say it's over 45.
Since 2017.
No, since 2011 to
Okay.
now, I have 45, at least 45 books out there.
So how do you in 12 years publish 45 books? Like how do you do that? What's the process?
Well, you have to not have a life, first of all. Make sure you don't have one of those. If you have one of those, let me tell you,
Forget
your output's going to be different. No, but one of the things is that I write to market. So I write to a particular market
it. Mm-hmm.
that wants shorter books,
Mm-hmm.
quick reads. So that's the market I write to.
Mm-hmm.
There is talk about this is called rapid release, where you have authors who release a book once a month or once every 2 months. It's a rapid release, and that
Mm-hmm.
lets, and it's based off the algorithms of Amazon, reader demand, marketing, and all that. So there's a lot of know-how that goes into rapid release to help build your backlist. So you're not writing, I don't believe, you're writing these big, massive tomes of works. You're writing shorter works because there is a market for that. People are busy. Do they want to spend time with a big book? It depends on the reader. But if you are marketing your book toward the set of readers who want a quick read, they don't want anything too difficult or too hard or too thought provoking. They just want to have an easy, relaxing read, then that market tends to like quicker books that they can read in one sitting or two sittings. So that's the market I write to. And plus, I write in a Christian historical fiction market. And recently, you may not know this, Kenny, but I started writing also for Harlequin. Start
Oh,
writing for Harlequin
okay.
historicals. So I write for this. I
Congratulations.
write for the general market as well. So
When,
um,
wait, I'm sorry. When did that start?
I got my first contract with them in 2021. I'm on my third and fourth book now with
Okay.
Harlequin. So my second book comes out in December. But that's more for the general market. And I do make that distinction because the Christian market, and how can I say this? Kidney may know I'm going with this. Um, the Christian market can be hard to navigate because some Christian readers have certain expectations
Yeah.
of Christian fiction. And a lot of them think Christian fiction is Amish fiction. And the one Amish book I read was not a romance. It was actually like a World War II story.
Mhm.
And then another Amish book I tried to read, I kept falling asleep after like 3 pages. And I was just like, this is not good. How is this popular? So Christian fiction has a lot of nuances to it. And there are authors like me who have wider views of Christian fiction,
Mhm.
meaning that like even in your book you dealt with certain things in your book that certain people in that market would not want you to
Yeah,
deal
they
with.
don't see it. Yeah.
And mind you, your book is fine, it's great, you know what I'm saying, but because you deal with real world people and real world consequences, your people are flawed and damaged, they've done all sorts of things, they said that's not, that we shouldn't have that type of Christian fiction. So with the secular market, and I'm going to sound like I'm being weird and I'm not doing that, sometimes I can explore certain things a little bit better in
Yeah.
that market. Now, I'm not saying that to discourage anyone. Please don't do you. But I used to read Harlequin growing up, and to write for them is a really big deal. So when I had the opportunity to get that opportunity, I ran with it. So, you know,
Well, congratulations. I'll have to check you out.
if you want to, it's like I said, it's a little different with my Christian stuff, obviously. But I right now I'm writing in Regency. I'm sorry, not Regency. I'm writing in pre-revolution France. That's my time period.
So I was going to ask you something else, but I want to know. So what was your research like for that?
Learning about France during the pre-revolution is so awesome because it was the era of decadence, opulence. Rich people are getting rich, poor people are getting poor, and the king, the queen, it's just a lot of decadence going on. Things are changing. This is right before the French Revolution, where they're cutting off people's heads, so all this is before that. So there's this creeping dread that things cannot continue like it is continuing. But it's all fantasy too. And so I tend to stay with the aristocratic lines, but I do try to put a little modern spin on them. So they are aware of the poor, they're aware of the hungry, they're aware of people who have less than they do, and they
Mhm.
try to do better. So I do a modern spin on it because most modern readers do want to see that modern spin with the fantasy of back in the day.
Mm. Did you watch Chevalier?
I did not. I
Is
wanted
is
to,
it the
and my
same time?
character is based off of him. One of
Okay,
my
I was gonna
characters are
ask, is it
based
the
off of
same
him.
time? It
Yeah.
was good. I got I went to a screening before I came out. I had
Hmm.
no clue about anything. I was like, screening free, I'll be there.
Yeah. St. George. He was St. George, and he was one
Yeah.
of the baddest people during pre-revolution France, and they call him St. George. He was an abolitionist, he was a violinist, he was a
Hmm.
swordsman, he
Yep.
was just this all-around talented guy. And when I was looking him up, I'm looking at these paintings of this black guy with lighter skin,
Mhm.
rouge on his face, a little lipstick on. I said, that man looks like Prince, and he fine, you know what I'm saying? Right. There's not too many men who could wear makeup that I get interested in. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I could see his hotness from this
Yes.
painting on Wikipedia from 300 years ago. I'm like, this dude is hot. And they did such a good job
Yeah.
depicting that. And he was just amazing character. I'm sorry, Kendi. I will go on and on. You see, dear listener, I love historical. There's a reason why I like historical. So yeah. What are you gonna say? I'm so sorry.
Oh, so I'm gonna go back to my question that I
Yeah.
wanted to ask. You were talking about, the type of market that you write for.
Hmm.
I was interested to know, what type of reader are you?
Me personally as a reader?
Yeah, you like, what type of books do you enjoy?
Oh, I read everything. I read
authors?
everything. I read Christian stuff. I read general market stuff. The only thing I don't read on a regular basis is like steampunk, because it's really mechanical, and some steampunk can get really, really mechanical, and I'm not really into machines, you know, you know what I'm saying? So I'll read steampunk when I'm having an author on my show who writes steampunk, but I don't read it as a choice. And I do read nonfiction, but not a lot of nonfiction. That's just not my interest, but I do read it from my show. But mostly I read just about everything out there. I have a very wide palette. I think anyone who's a reader, they just have a ferocious appetite to read. So I read everything. So I read the Christian market, I read the secular market, I read horror, I've read romance, sci-fi, fantasy, whatever. So I read it all.
So what was the one book? I know for me, I'll just ask the question. So what's the one book that you read that like got you hooked on reading? Or did you just always like to read?
I don't remember a time when I didn't have a book in my hand. My grandmother taught me how to read when we were very young. She taught me how to read and to write. And I don't have a memory of not being able to do any of that. So I remember reading all the time. I just read anything I get my hands on. And one of the more one of the books I used to read, especially as a kid, was during the 90s. And I've aged myself now, but during the 90s, we used to read R.L. Stein or R.L. Stein. We used to read Christopher Pike, L.J. Smith. That was the decade of the pocketbook, paperback pocketbooks. You could put them in your pocket. We used to go to the library all the time, pick up books. Vampires were evil back then, and I used to read a ton of those back then. So I used to read tons and tons of different books. But I would probably say the book that left an impression on me as a young child, and I recently picked it up again, probably last year because I hadn't read it in a really long time, uh, was a book called Witch Witch. And you may go, "Oh no, Parker, you're messing up the whole tone of the show." It's not that, but it was a funny story, middle grade. It was written back in 1979. It was really funny. And for those of you who worry about that type of thing, I never once thought I was going to turn into a witch. I never once thought about doing spells, none of that kind of thing. So to parents out there who worry about this, please talk to your children. If you're worried about what they're reading, talk to them about it. People who like to read like to talk about the books they read, you know. So that's just that. But my parents, I raised a preacher and a Sunday school teacher. Wasn't none of that happened in the house. So, but it was a book I read called Witch Witch, and it was really funny. And when I read it again recently, I was still laughing. And I say that because it was geared toward a younger adult segment of the population. And nowadays, young adult is highly sensualized as opposed to being stories about being young.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have the humor we grew up with. There are books that were geared for the young adult that were humorous. There are books that were dramatic, like mysteries, like Nancy Drew Mysteries. You had the Babysitter's Club, Sweet Valley High, Sweet Valley Twins.
Oh,
What's the brothers? I forgot the brothers' name. The
Hardy Boy.
Hardy
Hardy
Boys.
Boy.
You know, those were the type of mysteries. They were geared toward the young people. They weren't highly sensualized. Nowadays, the young adult books are geared toward adults because adults are reading them. And so the young adults don't really sound like 17. They sound like they're 31, you know? So
Actually, I'm like, I wasn't doing this.
yeah, I don't remember doing that when I was 17. I just wanted to get home so I didn't get in trouble with my mom and dad. And then they take out the innocence of young adult when they highly sensualize them. And this is a person who likes romance. So understand, I don't think certain things need to be in books for young people, even though I admit I read stuff when I was younger, but it was, you know, that's just how I was back then. But nowadays they make it so sensualized that the young adult reader doesn't have books just to enjoy their youth. Did I go
Right.
off topic just now? I think I went off topic, but I was using that book just to show the humor that was involved with the book, as opposed to nowadays you don't have that humor. You may have humor, but it's really dark humor, really sarcastic humor. It's not just good, fun, slapstick humor. So,
I agree 100%
mhm.
about that. So, any of your characters remind you of yourself?
The first book, the first romance rather, I wrote was me ministering to myself
Hmm.
that it is the Lord who makes me beautiful. Because I have had in the past, I don't have it like I used to. I don't really have it anymore, stuff when I get stressed. But I used to have this very horrible self-image of myself. And I talked about it recently in a nonfiction anthology I was a part of recently. I used to feel like I was a monster.
Oh,
Like when
wow.
you looked at me, I felt like I was the ugliest person ever walked. I couldn't begin to tell you where that came from. It could have been because my parents weren't cruel or anything like that. It could be just I was bullied as a kid, and then the '90s was the year of the bobblehead. You know, you had a big girl with a big head and skinny body, and
Yeah,
maybe that was a
I
sign of
remember
beauty
that.
back then. It could be that, and I'm a big girl. I'm still a big girl, you know. Yes, I'm still a big girl, but I think that may have led to it. So I used to think I was just ugly, fat girl, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Lord helped me through a young girl at my church, realize that that we often say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but actually beauty is in the eye of the creator.
That's good.
And a
That's really
young girl
good.
helped me. Yeah, exactly. She helped me really realize that obviously the Lord sees me beautiful. And I thought about that as a creator myself. When I finished my book and I've done the very best I can, I think that book's beautiful. That story is nice. That story looks lovely because
Mm-hmm.
I'm the creator. See what I mean? And once I had that breakthrough, that sense of worthlessness, so not being ugly and all that went away. Now, there are times when I get stressed and I start to think that way. Then what you have to do is what one lady said, you have to confess what the Lord told you, not what Satan tells you. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So then you distract yourself. If you feel ugly, let's say you're feeling ugly today, right? I'm not saying you're feeling ugly, but let's say you just feel blah. Well, go get your nails done,
Yep.
or, go get some new lipstick, buy some
That's all.
earrings.
That does it for me. Dress
Yeah.
up when I look good,
Yeah.
feel
When you
good.
look good, you feel good. There's no truer words than that. So you have to start. It's a mindset change. I don't like using the term mindset because it has a new age connotation with it. But for the lack of a better term, you have to transform your thinking. That's the word. Transform your thinking so you don't let those intrusive thoughts continue to build in you.
Yep. Okay. So that was which book was that?
It was called Many Strange Women, written by one. And it was book one of my Sins of the Flesh series. And this was my first edgy Christian romance. Back then, I had an interracial couple. My guy was white, my girl was black, marrying my own marriage. And basically, the guy says he wants this guy to save himself. He wants to marry an ugly woman. So he meets this woman and he perceives her as ugly, but because she believes it too, she's not offended by him.
Yeah.
And he goes, let's get married. So she marries this guy. He's drunk and spells drunk, and they get married. They come to find out he's a millionaire because I'm sorry, it makes a harlequin left over, but all my guys didn't have money in my books. I don't want to have a poor guy in my book. God forgive me. I mean, he could work for it though. He could work for it, but I'm just saying, just and so they get married, and she's so everything about her is standoffish towards him, and he's very handsome. But over time he starts to fall in love with her, and then because he falls in love with her, he doesn't see those imperfections now. He
Yeah.
doesn't see what she sees. And then over course she learns to love herself because he loves her too. So it becomes that, but it's basically kind of a crazy story. Like, I haven't read it in a long time. I'm kind of scared to read it. So like,
I have stuff like that too. I mean, I'm scared to read that. I
I
don't
don't
know
want to
what that
read
was.
anymore because I may read it and want to change everything. And so it's three books in that series called Sins of the Flesh. It's three books: Many Strange Women, The Other Man, and the last book is called Vengeful Vows. They're all online. You can get them online on Amazon.
Well, thank you for letting me know
And
that.
that's not historical. That was before historical because I wrote that in 2013, 2014, and 2015 respectively. Um, but yeah, that's those are our contemporary. Well, I guess they're not contemporary now, are they? They were contemporary
Then,
edgy Christian romance. Mm-hmm.
so when you look at the body of your work, 45 books, is there a common message that you tend to weave through your books?
I would say I don't believe I have a common message, except that no, I don't think I do have a common message. I don't
Okay.
think I do. I think it's more so, what is this story going to talk about? Oh, I take that back. I take it back. Now you made me think about it. I do have a lot of my characters tend to have two names because it reflects something of my own journey.
Mhm.
How people may call you by your first name, but you may go by a nickname.
Mhm.
Or when you're around so and so, you're Mr. Cole. When you're around someone, say, "Hey, bud," I do think that is something, and that's been something unconsciously that I've done, is have my characters have more than two names. And I think it's because we're different people around different people. So
Yep.
around your mom and dad, your daughter, around husband, your wife, around your sisters, around your friends, your friend, and you're going to be different things to different people. So I think that is a common theme I have. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just something I think I'm aware of.
Okay. So what's your latest release? Tell us about that.
Well, my latest release is coming up. It's a book called The Butler's Daughter, and it's book 2 of the Daughters of Black Gotham series that's coming up on August 31st.
Okay, a couple more weeks.
Oh, yeah. And here's the thing, I have to get it to my editor by the 18th, and I'm not anywhere near done with it. But
Mhm.
because of the deadlines really pushing me to get it done, I'm really excited for this one. This one is a bit more character driven than my first book in this series called The Butcher's Daughter, which
Okay.
takes place in 1849. This one takes place in 1850 and it ends in 1857. Um, and it's going to be book 2 of 3 in this series, but it's called Daughters of Black Gotham.
I'm looking at The Butcher's Daughter right now.
I like this particular series because it was a slice of life about African American history that a lot of people don't know about.
Mhm.
During this time period in New York, Lower Manhattan area was the rise of the Black aristocracy. So these were like people like Frederick Douglass, people
Mhm.
like that who were orators and highly educated. They weren't millionaires, but they were, I would call, if I can use, John Witherspoon, thousandaire, you know, and but they were highly educated. And during this time period, they were trying to not just get equality, but they were trying to be seen as human, because around this time where the book takes place, there is something called racial scientific racism, where, for the lack of a better term, Darwin came with his theory of evolution,
Mhm.
talks about favored races. And so you have people saying, well, it's not my fault that the Negro is not on the same level as the white man. It's not my fault. This is what nature did. You see what I'm saying? So you had
Wow.
to deal with that type of sentiment.
Mhm.
And I'm just telling you the truth. This is an actual thing. There was a branch of this scientific ideology that was called, and this is just a branch, the N-word ology.
What?
Yes. And there were people who called themselves the N-wordologist because they wanted to study the Negro of this time period, because they said he is not a white man with dark skin. He is not a man. He is a lower species of human. He wasn't human. He's a lower species. So imagine they're fighting that along with slavery, along with equal rights, along with this, along with that. There's a lot going on, but I don't focus on that entirely. I want
Mhm.
to focus on the Black aristocracy part of it. So that's what I tend to focus on, with all of that mixed in throughout the narrative.
Okay. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So if someone is new to you, new to your work, what book would you recommend them to read?
That's a great question. That is a great question. It depends on if they want a quick, short read.
Mm-hmm.
They can go to any of my map projects, and you can see that when you go online, all my map projects are with like 30 other authors who are involved with the books. So any of my map projects, or if you want something a little more meatier, um, I would say, if you like historical, I actually would say The Butcher's Daughter, or A Match for Bernadette, which is a mail order bride series book. If you want something more contemporary, the Sins of the Flesh series. I was doing a series called Michigan Sweet Romance, because I was taking place in Michigan.
Mhm.
I was doing a couple of those. Those are contemporary. Uh, then there's a cute little holiday story I have called Wish Upon a Strawberry Shortcake. It's so sweet you puke, that type of thing. And
Don't say that.
well, it's so sugary sweet,
What's
just
it called? I'm gonna look for it right
yeah,
now.
it's like 99 cents. I didn't make it, hard to buy.
What's
But
it
it's like
called?
99 cents. It's like 40 pages. Just a cute little story. But it depends on what you're interested
Wait,
in.
what's it called? I'm looking for it for real. What's it called? I love holiday.
Wish Upon a Strawberry Shortcake.
Okay.
And I got that when I was doing a writing. I was on a deadline for a writing thing, so I got a hotel room and closeted myself into this hotel room. And the idea came because I was looking at the TV and I saw a strawberry shortcake pop up. And I said, "Wish upon a strawberry shortcake, dream about an apple." Oh, and then the title just came to me, sort of the story. So,
Yes.
so be like it's a holiday one
All
too.
right, I bought it.
Oh, thank you so much for your support.
I
I
love
appreciate it.
holiday. I love holiday stories. I read
Yeah.
them all year round.
Yeah,
So
this was a little bit more it's supposed to be part of a series, but this one ends on its own. Like they're all standalone, they're all short standalone, but I
mhm,
haven't finished the other ones yet because, busy. So
very busy. All right. Well, our time is winding down. Thank you so
Mhm,
much for joining me and chatting with me about your work, your process.
mhm.
Um, oh, I didn't even ask you about your podcast. Tell us quickly about your podcast.
Well, my
Podcast.
podcast
Plural.
is I have two podcasts. One's called Right Stuff, one's called The Parker J. Cole Show. Basically, I showcase Christian authors worldwide and I talk about things all over the spectrum on The Parker J. Cole Shows, commentary, interview, authors, stuff like that. And I've been doing it now for 10 years.
Wow. Who's the most interesting person you've interviewed?
I have had so many on there. It's hard to pick out one. One of the more memorable episodes, I say it like this, is when I talked about the multiverse, and we had a lot of people like calling in and asking questions, if that was existing, the string theory, just from a godly point of view, if the multiverse from a godly point of view, that was a good one. One of my favorite, no one liked it but me, but one of my favorite was talking about the many worlds, because I like sci-fi and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, there's so many that I've enjoyed because I enjoy the conversation. Oh, I will say this. There was one book series I read, and he's been on the show, just like you've been on the show several times. He's been on the show several times. And his book was about a girl who gets abducted by aliens and thrown on another planet and just left there. And you don't find out why till book 3, right? And
Oh my goodness.
I remember telling him, what gave them the right to take this poor girl, throw her on the planet, and just leave her there? She has no frame of reference. She doesn't know how to speak the language, anything. It's a sci-fi story. And I told him that's when I started getting to know him really well, because I was on the
Mhm.
phone with him after and before the show for like an hour, and because I said, how would you do this? Blah, 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 And so,
Mhm.
I'll be honest with you, we're good friends. His name is Alan Stedham, and the name of his book is Jordan's World. That's his series. So if I were to say the book that really left a huge impact, and there's more than just his, but that's the one that kind of comes to mind right now, is
Mhm.
Jordan's World, sci-fi, 3 books. I think anyone who reads it will love it. It's Alan Stedham, and it's Jordan's World. So
I'm gonna ask this question. This is totally off topic, but
go right ahead.
you brought up aliens. What do you
Mm-hmm.
think about the US government having aliens uh and UFOs in their possession?
Isn't it fascinating how for so many years I kept saying, "Oh, ain't nothing out there. They all lying and crazy." Now it's like we see things we can't explain. It's like, which is it? Come on,
Not
Cletus.
just we see things, like I listened to the hearing, not just
Yeah, they said they found some non-human biologics. That's what
yeah, I'm
they
like,
said.
wait,
But
what?
here's my problem with the whole thing. Here's my problem with the whole thing. If it's out there, just show it. Doesn't matter about ideology, doesn't matter about worldview, agenda. Literally, just show it to us. Stop the cat and mouse game. You're
I
not
would
going,
agree with that
yeah,
because
you're not going to destroy
when,
society if you do.
so when they ask like the witnesses, well, where did it come from or where did you find it? We can't tell you that. What? Why are you here? Why are you?
Why are we even having these discussions then? And that's what drives me crazy. It's like I'm totally fine either way. Like it won't, my faith will not be destroyed if I find out that the Lord created other beings. It doesn't bother me, right? But my problem with this whole UFO thing, if it is truly there, just show us.
Mhm.
Stop the games. Stop all of this. The guy's like, oh, we can't talk about that. Why, like you said, why are we having the hearings then?
Right. That was
Why are we here? You know, I was like, why are we here
here.
then? Like, I expect for you to roll out a table with a plastic bag and some hearts, 3 or 4 hearts and 4 fingers and an organ we've never seen before. Just put it on the table and said, we found this in
Right.
Atlanta, Georgia, right next to this. You know, give us something to chew on at least. But
That
they
was
won't do
actually the
that.
very first thing they said. It was like, if you're expecting to see whatever, that's not going to happen. I should have stopped. I should have stopped watching then.
Yeah. But that's the point. Why tell us and then not show us, no matter what it is? And that's what irritated me. It's like, well, why? I was like, yeah, I watched the hearings too. So I'm sitting there going, why are we here? You know, I mean, I want to see it. Well, we can't tell you. Why not? You see what I'm saying? Like, you're telling us we have UFOs and UAPs, or however you want to call it, but then you don't want to show us anything because you can't. Why can't you? Then why are you know, it's kind of circular. You know what I mean? I know what they're saying was national security. Against what? You see what I'm saying? Because you can't tell us anything. So who are we playing national security against? So I'm sorry, dear listener, I do get worked up over certain topics, but
Me too. And that's totally just off topic, but so interesting to me, just the whole thing. Cause I don't particularly like sci-fi, but I like Marvel comics,
yeah,
and stuff like that.
and I'm a sci-fi girl. You know, if you, my old bio used to say Star Trek, you know, fanatic. So
I
I'm
actually
totally
just
decided.
watched Star Trek last summer. Like I just watched all, like from beginning to end, just watched all of them. I never watched it before.
You thought
But
Discovery?
I started watching, no, on Disney Plus. I started watching The Mandalorian, and then I felt like I needed to go back. So I just, oh no, that's Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Wars. I'm gonna Star
Star
Trek.
Wars.
Yeah,
Star Trek. My grandmother used to watch that. No, I
No.
don't. Now, remind you, this is like back in the day. I won't date myself. But it was like fake, like kind of fake to me back then.
Oh my gosh, watching Star Trek is a emotional thing for me.
Are you
Star
serious?
Trek. I have so many memories of Star Trek. I have a belief system about Star Trek. I have things about Star Trek that if I were to stay on this call for another 45 minutes, I couldn't even begin to scratch the surface. I have so many viewpoints. Because I love Star Trek. Because Star Trek was always about boldly going where no one has gone
before. Yes.
And that is the creators, especially the writers, that is the call of imagination. Yes. Keep pushing the boundaries of where you can go. Like if you can go, how far can you go, right? To the farthest star. Where's the farthest star? Let's go find it. And that's what I loved about Star Trek. Now, Star Wars is more of a contained story. And it's more of a, like, you know, soap opera in space, you know. And I was never really into Star Wars. My sisters are, but I'm not really into Star Wars. But Star Trek, yes. No. Yes. He said no, not for me.
Not even let me go see. Because I used to watch it with my grandmother, and I was like, this don't look real.
You probably watched TOS, which is the original series with Captain Kirk, and he's the only he's the only captain that matters. I know there are other captains in the Star Trek franchise, but he's the only one that matters. I don't care what anyone says. I will fight you to the death on it. Okay. But
I have
Captain
watched
Kirk
the movie,
is my captain.
Like I watched the movie with Chris Pine. I've watched the movies, but not like the series. No.
Yeah, I'm a fanatic, really. So I have to be careful.
Yeah, God bless you. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I will have you back. You're gonna come back?
As long as you do me the favor, my darling.
Of course, of
All
course.
right, I'm gonna be back.
Well, thank you everybody for listening in tonight. Until next time, be blessed.